So I'm looking at people have a lot of things that really tick them off, and that's because they know the world is, as we once knew it, is spinning out of control. Here's a story I just came across. A woman by the name of Ellen McLary, or McLarney, I guess she'd be more Irish that way, or her ancestors would have been. Says, this is from a website I'm looking at. She's a professor at Duke University, and she says that, this is from frontpagemag.com. She says that soft jihad is a force for good. Now, what is soft jihad? Oh, I will kill you last, liberal. Thank you, useful idiot. Or, I will only shoot 15 of you today, and I will save the rest of you for next month. Soft jihad. Even at Oxford University in England, which is staffed by a bunch of old fools, they have concluded after reading the Quran that Islam is not a religion of peace. Oh, it only took them 1,500 years to come to that conclusion, but they've come to that conclusion. Yet this whack job, I mean, these people are bat poop crazy, and they're teaching our children. 9:45, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com, 48. And we have a caller with us. You're up next on News Radio 1310 and newsradio1310.com.
You know, I am fortunate to be a contractor, and throughout this Magic Valley, I deal with some of very big private owners of trucking companies, feed companies, dairymen, ranchers, everything you can imagine. I'm fortunate enough to be there as a client of mine, and I couldn't be more blessed. But you see, the thing of it is these guys are self-employed, smart businessmen, and they understand that if they don't keep the books squared away, that they will go down. I've seen farmers that were so huge that then they went down because of mismanagement and the effect it had on the people that worked for them and throughout wherever they did business. It was just collateral damage was unbelievable. So when you look at a country like America, and like we have $19 trillion worth of debt, plus the unfunded mandates, another 180 or whatever it is. People have no idea what $1 trillion even is. You see, well, America could never go bankrupt. Well, I don't know. The only reason this thing continues to roll on is because of these business people, these hard-working, smart business people across this nation that keep this country rolling in spite of what's happening from this administration. And I'll hang up, Bill.
Hey, thank you. And on top of that, we mentioned earlier, we've had a decade of growth below 3%, GDP below 3%. We're not going to enter a second decade of that. That great big economic engine is slowing. It's big, so it's going to take it a while to slow down. It's like trying to slow down that speeding train. But it is slowing down, and the brakes are on. And yes, at some point, it's going to come to a halt. And I'll tell you what, all bets are off. We have another caller with us. You're on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com.
I can't believe I'm going to say it, but I kind of agree with the drive-by caller. Not the way he wants me to, but the problem with America right now, as far as equal justice under the law, that's what it all boils down to. I pay taxes, you pay taxes, he should pay taxes. He's probably illegal. That's why he's so pissed off all the time. But corporations also pay taxes, whether you want to believe it or not. I know a lot of them have tax shelters, which need to be eliminated, but they also shouldn't pay 34% corporate income tax. They should make it across the board flat tax. When you spend money, you pay a tax, not when you earn the money, because then you run into all this double taxation, which happens constantly. Do the math. I mean, you get taxed at both ends all the time, constantly, everywhere you go. But if everybody paid 6 or 8, 10% taxes on what they purchase, we would be in much better shape. And Joe Blow from Kokomo that makes $30,000 a year, you paid 10% on things you purchase. That's fair.
Right. Consumption tax.
And the guy that spends multi-millions of dollars on a house, he also pays that same percentage. That's fair. That's equal justice under the law. I mean, we all need to be represented equally. We don't need to have this cronyism. And that's what gives, I could go on and on. I'm so pissed every time I hear that guy, but I'm so glad you don't hang up on him.
Hey, I thank you for the call. Number one, I just want to point out, he's an American citizen. So, and I trust him. He may not always agree with us, but he's honest. So let's make sure of that. And he's a co-religionist, and I think he's very devout and strong in his faith. Number two, flat tax or fair tax. The fair tax really being a lot. It's just a variation on that. Likely will be the route we'll have to go in this country. You do have, well, unless you end up with a Democrat majority again in Congress, they might go with a value-added tax. We don't want that because that will slow that GDP growth down to below 1% every year, and we'll never, ever have a productive country again and never, ever be an economic leader. So on that note, I'll tell you what, I think that we keep hearing this year after year after year. We're being told, well, the tax code now, income tax code, is up to 72,000 pages or whatever it is. Why? And then so yes, we really need to change that, but it doesn't change. Why doesn't it change? Because the government can use the IRS and as a cudgel against the people. If you eliminate the income tax, there's no IRS, and then you can't. The secret police force goes away. The Cheka, they're not there, or the NKVD, they're not there to bop you over the head when you get out of line. That's simply what it's really become. So all of these double-talking politicians who say, yeah, you know what, we really do need to reform that system. When? I've been hearing that I'll be 54 years old later this year. And as long as I've been listening to my parents and their friends and the neighbors complain about taxes, and then I started paying taxes, I've been hearing, we're going to change this. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because that would take one fist away from government and might actually restore some of your liberties. And they don't really want that. I've grown and I've come to that conclusion. Speaking of income tax, I was looking over a map the other day that someone sent me, and it's an income tax map of the various state income taxes. Washington State has none. Now, Washington State has some other taxes that'll gouge you. Even Idaho, we're in the middle of the range. Our state income tax on the highest, and this is the highest rates people pay, but it's about 7.5%. California is nearly 14%. California still is hemorrhaging people. Why? Especially people who make money, because their income is being confiscated. In fact, it's happening in every state with high income tax confiscatory rates. And yet, you can't get this through people's heads. We do still have some freedom of movement. And if you can afford to pack up and move, you will. But then again, I guess if we have a few more government fists coming in, and government agencies and more regulations and more pages and codes, that day may yet come where you can't move, and then you'll just have to sit there and be pummeled every day by the government, which is here to help you. 9:52, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Hey, on a more pleasant note, I love to eat. I'm not going to sugarcoat this in any way. And I've never met a pizza I didn't like. I'm also a meat eater. When I hear people say I'm a vegan, I think, all right, and you just voted for Bernie Sanders, and I saw you driving the the hybrid down the street, so I knew that. No, as a meat eater, that includes not only what I buy in the shelves at the grocery store, but also wild game. Love both. I have a great appreciation for what they do at High Desert Meat Processing here in Twin Falls, where they process one animal at a time, and what you bring in is exactly what you'll get back. Darren Van Horn, the owner of High Desert Meat Processing, he has been in this business for over 30 years. And you can go to his Facebook page, High Desert Meat Processing on Facebook, and read reviews of other customers. Or give Darren a call, 734-9949. High Desert Meat does in-house smoking, and nothing is shipped out. Specialty meats include jerky, salami, summer sausage, pepperoni, breakfast sausage, brats, hot dogs, and much more. USDA approved. And Darren works closely with local beef growers and their programs to ensure quality meat. His telephone number is 734-9949. And so, keeping in our theme today about people being angry and results of that being seen in primaries last night, and a primary 6 days away in Idaho for Republicans and Constitution Party members, we wanted to point out that it's not just, though, the economics. If you are a person of traditional faith, you are just beside yourself with a country that is just so hell-bent on killing unborn children, on telling little boys in the kindergarten that yeah, sure, if you feel like a girl, put on the dress, and telling everyone else they have to accept that. And, if you express your religious faith in any way, you're told, well, we got to shut your business down and fine you. I think that we've reached the tipping point for those people as well. This comes from the Christian Post. Great headline. Franklin Graham supports Catholic Archdiocese break with Girl Scouts over abortion and gay marriage. The Girl Scouts, when my sister was in Girl Scouts way back in the dark ages, well, she wouldn't recognize this organization anymore. They don't just do the s'mores anymore and sell cookies. They get involved in all sorts of political issues. Well, they're trying to inculcate them and bring them into a lifestyle, recruit them into lifestyles that mom and dad may not necessarily approve of, or at least would not have back when I was young. The Reverend Franklin Graham recently stated his support for a Catholic archdiocese whose leadership is ending its connection to the Girl Scouts. In a Facebook post published Tuesday morning, Graham expressed his support for the Archdiocese of St. Louis opposition to the Girl Scouts over the youth organization's stance on abortion and homosexuality. The Girl Scouts organization sure isn't what it used to be. St. Louis Archbishop Robert Carlson isn't worried about being politically correct and letting people know about it either, wrote Graham. Archbishop Carlson is exactly right. The ways of the world are incompatible with biblical values. More church leaders need his boldness in speaking the truths that set those who follow God's word apart from the rest of the world. Now, I don't know how you separate yourself. There's something called the Benedict option, which a lot of Christians are talking about, and that is just going off and living apart from everybody else. However, the last time I heard about someone doing that, it was Randy Weaver, and of course the government came in and started shooting he and his family to pieces because, well, you just can't do that. You can't go try to isolate yourself and live calmly alone. Not in the good old USA any longer, a land of the free, home of the brave. So what are your options here? Even at my church, I was at Mass a couple of weeks ago, and at the Mass I was at, there were Boy Scouts there. I think that's great. I think it's great the church gets involved. But in one Roman Catholic diocese, they would not have any involvement with an organization like that anymore. That would be St. Louis. Not just the Girl Scouts, but they would drop the Boy Scouts as well because the Boy Scouts, it was Robert Gates. It really wasn't most of your local leadership. And when we criticize them, we should be fair. They had nothing to do with it. It was the liberal Robert Gates who got put in charge of the Boy Scouts of America, who said, hey, anything goes now. Come into my tent. See what I mean? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. We have to eventually take a stand. We've got to do it in our churches as well. Because if we don't, and I'm not saying that, that we should shun these organizations. I just don't think churches should be sponsors if the churches do believe in a biblical interpretation of our lives. And if these people can't match it any longer, or if they're endorsing something that runs counter to what our churches teach, then our churches have to have that clean break. And I think they can find other sponsors. I think that there will be other people who'd be willing to sponsor them. And I'm not saying that, but I've got to tell you, I was thinking about this the other day. I was watching Chuck Schumer on one of these TV shows. Chuck Schumer, who is for abortion, in other words, killing little babies in their mother's wombs. Chuck Schumer, who is for same-sex marriage. And yet Chuck Schumer claims to be a very devout Jew. Well, I have Christian friends who say, look, Jesus came along and he negated the Old Testament, etc. That was not the view of Christians in the 1800s and the early 1900s in this country. It just seems to have evolved in that sense. But if you really are an observant Jew, then you believe in those books. And you know what? That God told Moses, he said, look, if somebody causes a woman to abort her pregnancy, they got to die. And if you find a man and a man lying together in a tent, you got to take them outside of the encampment, and they've got to die. If you find a woman and a woman, and I'm not making this up, folks, it's in the book, they were to get the same fate. They were to be stoned to death. Now, we don't do that any longer in this country. But when I hear leadership and politicians saying all of these things, and I'm not saying we should do these things to these people. No, I'm not endorsing it. I'm just telling you. Let them live their way. We're not going to interfere with their choices. Let them live their lifestyles. Just leave us alone, and let's not endorse it by sponsoring them. Rush Limbaugh is on the way in just a few minutes on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. God willing, and the creek don't rise, I'll be allowed to do this all over again tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock, although after the last 5 minutes, who knows? And then Sean Hannity following 1 o'clock news today, Glenn Beck after 4 o'clock news, Dave Ramsey tonight, right here on News Radio 1310, KLIX.